When you look at things that happened during your years that you have no control, for example, the economic collapse, it wasn't really an economic policy of Bush's, but that's what Obama inherited. 9/11, Bush, that plan was in place for years ahead of time. With you, two things come to mind: the pandemic, and number two is the civil unrest that really had nothing to do with policies. It is just these are
well,
events.
I think the civil unrest came to a certain extent because of the plague. The plague is the Chinese plague, and it came over here, and they could have stopped it. In my opinion, they could have stopped it, and they should have stopped it, and they didn't or were unable to. So it was either incompetence or they knew. And I guess the third one is they knew and they decided not to at a later date. But it's the Chinese plague, and it's not a good thing, and that, I think, had something to do with the civil unrest.
You said what I thought was in jest, just knowing your sense of humor, even when you made that comment about, hey, Russia, if you heard me, if you found those 30,000 emails, that's kind of the way you, when you're in front of people, you do do
Well,
the other night when you said,
by the way, that was said as a joke,
right?
And the fake news picked it up like I was.
And I talked to you after.
And by the way, they ended up immediately when the last word was out because they didn't want to hear everybody, including me, laughing.
But is that
was
what you?
Fake news.
But is that what you meant when you said, don't do so much testing?
No. No.
Yeah.
No. Somebody said I may have been joking. No. We got so good at testing. You know, what we did is a miracle between the ventilators and all of the things we did. But we got so good at testing that we've done 25 million tests. We've done 20 or 21 million more than Germany and these other countries. If you do more tests, that means you're going to have more cases. So we've done so good that we're showing we have a lot of cases. And everyone's saying that they have more cases. Well, we have more cases because we have more testing. So they can test a kid who's got sniffles and is going to be better in about 2 hours because, you know, the young kids have done unbelievably well. Their immune system, I guess, or whatever is stronger. So when you do 25 million tests, you're going to show you have cases. And by doing all those tests, while it's good to do them in one way, in another way, it makes us look bad, and it's crazy.
But you don't mean, do you mean slow down testing?
No, I don't mean slow down, but if we did slow down, or if we didn't do so many, let's say instead of 25 million tests, we did 5 million tests, we'd be very low in cases right now, and everybody would say, isn't that wonderful? By doing so much and being so advanced, not only did we do a lot of testing, but we're far more advanced than any other. We have the 5-minute test. We have tests that they don't even think of, other countries. You know, you hear about South Korea. They're always congratulating me on the great job I've done with testing. But the media, the fake news, doesn't get the word out. That's why it's good to speak to you.
Right.
So we've done 25 million tests. That means we show a lot of cases. And that's all fine, but it makes us look bad, even though it should make us look good.
Interesting. So when you looked at what happened in Tulsa, you talked about this in Tulsa the other night, and your personal style, your personability has always been your greatest asset. Since as a candidate or as president, you did not sell out an arena.
Okay.
Does that make you want to?
When I went there, it was the first time. Now, I heard 2 weeks of nothing but, you are going to die if you go. You are going to die. You'll never live again. You'll never breathe again if you walk into that very beautiful arena. They treated us very nicely, except for one problem. They called a curfew. So people that were in line had to leave. You had people sitting, waiting for 4 or 5 days in advance, and they called a curfew, and they had to leave. I don't know where they went, but they had to leave. You know that. And then I called up and I said, it shouldn't be curfew. I called the mayor and I said, Mayor, you can't do a curfew. It's not fair to our people. They called a curfew because you had some very bad people coming. They did come and the police did a good job, but they called curfew, number one. Number two, you had nothing but horrible press for a week and a half, 2 weeks leading up to it, that you were going to be in bad shape if you walked into the arena, and various other things. Now, despite that, we actually had a good crowd. For anybody else, it would be a good crowd. But I agree with you. It's the only time that I've had a vacant seat since I came down the escalator with the First Lady. But this just came out. As you came in, you didn't give this to me, but this just came out, and people have to see this. Trump rally, you see what that says? Gives Fox News the largest Saturday night audience in its history. So, my speech the other night was the largest audience in the history of Fox on Saturday night. That covers many, many years and many, many big shows. So this speech, now, let me give you this. Online, it was even bigger than this. So online, you have many different sites, but they say it was the biggest thing in a long time. Now, nobody's going to write that. And the reason I talk about it is because if you don't tell it yourself, nobody else is going to.
Well, you can't say nobody.
Because you've been fair.
Yeah,
no. Fox put it out.
Yep.
I mean, Fox put it out. So it's the biggest, the largest Saturday night audience in its history. Nobody's going to say that. I'll say it. I'm saying it now. If I didn't say it, they'll put it out. Nobody's going to pick it up because the fake news won't do that. But think of what that means. Now, a lot of people saw it. A lot of people went to Tulsa. And it was rough because they had, so-called protesters, anarchists, and various other people. And they said, let's go home and watch it on television. But this is much more important. We had a very nice crowd of warriors. They were warriors. But it's the first empty seat. But these are the best ratings we've ever had.
Interesting.
I think that means something. Because that, to me, is like a poll.
Right.
And online, even better. We got so good at testing. What we did is a miracle between the ventilators and all of the things we did. But we got so good at testing that we've done 25 million tests. We've done 20 or 21 million more than Germany and these other countries. If you do more tests, that means you're going to have more cases. So we've done so good that we're showing we have a lot of cases. And everyone's saying they have more cases. Well, we have more cases because we have more testing. So they can test a kid who's got sniffles and is going to be better in about 2 hours because, the young kids have done unbelievably well. Their immune system, I guess, or whatever is stronger. So when you do 25 million tests, you're going to show you have cases. And by doing all those tests, while it's good to do them in one way, in another way, it makes us look bad. And it's crazy.
But do you mean slow down testing?
No, I don't mean slow down. But if we did slow down, or if we didn't do so many, let's say instead of 25 million tests, we did 5 million tests, we'd be very low in cases right now. And everybody would say, isn't that wonderful? By doing so much and being so advanced, not only did we do a lot of testing, but we're far more advanced than any other. We have the 5-minute test. We have tests that they don't even think of, other countries. You hear about South Korea. They're always congratulating me on the great job I've done with testing. But the media, the fake news, doesn't get the word out. That's why it's good to speak to you. So we've done 25 million tests. That means we show a lot of cases. And that's all fine. But it makes us look bad, even though it should make us look good.
Mr. President, we talk about the history of the White House. What do you think when you're walking through the colonnade here, when you talk about the history of this place?
Well, it's got a great history. And all my life, I've seen presidents and leaders of other countries, from dictators to prime ministers to presidents to kings and queens. You see them walking along the colonnade, and you see this is a ramp. Interesting story. It's a ramp, and this was built for FDR. This was a newer surface when he became president because of his wheelchair situation. So it goes right here down, but it's at a little bit of an angle. But this is a very soft angle.
Right. Now, do you remember the moment? You know the campaign, you know the play-by-play of it, but do you remember the moment when this became your office, when this became the place you live? Did you have one of those?
I do. I remember the first night more than any other night and any other time when I walked up. And the Lincoln bedroom is right next to where I stay. And you think of the history and you say, it's my first night at the White House. And you really have to think, you sort of say, because you grow up with the White House, right? The president, the White House. And all of a sudden, it was the first night out of 4 years. Now we're into it 3.5 years, and we have an election coming up. But at that time, it sounded and seemed so far away.
They burned this to the ground in 1814. They built it up again. And then...
Mostly the interior. The exterior was not, it stayed. But they had to fix it. But the interior was pretty well burned out.
As a builder, can you imagine what Washington was thinking when he picks this place out and it's all swamp and it's a compromised location?
I think maybe they got it better than they do nowadays. But they picked the right spot, and it's an incredible building. If you look at it from this angle, I think you might see it. That is a great shot, because nobody sees that. This is the Rose Garden. And I just think that's a great shot. And if you look at the detailing around the windows, and it's just, an incredibly beautiful place.
Mr. President, it's hard to believe, up until the Civil War, you could walk up, knock on the door, and have an appointment with the president.
Yeah.
Can you believe it's the same job?
So Andrew Jackson, when he was president, they had a party for America in the White House. Thousands of people poured into the building. It was different.
They wrecked the place.
They wrecked it, but it was a little bit different. Well, you know Andrew Jackson very well. You
Yeah.
did a great piece on him. But they had a big party, and it was a different time.
It was.
They had their own difficulties. Everybody has certain difficulties. They had difficulties, and they had safety difficulties also.
When you go through your legacy, the 4 years or the 8 years, you go through it. Do you, when you look at those portraits on the wall, and when no one's around, do you ever say, where do I line up? Because you're a competitive guy by nature. Where do I line up? Does that matter to you?
Well, they actually change, and the president has the right to choose where
Everything goes.
he or she should be. And I haven't thought about portraits yet. I think that's a good sign, right? If I'm thinking about portraits,
Then it's over.
They say, what's going on over here? So I haven't even thought about it yet. But I think we'll have a very good spot. I think history will judge us as having done a very good job. Do you want to go in?
Yeah, here's the Oval Office. You are unique in that, really, Truman was not a rich guy. Lincoln was not a rich guy. So when you come to a mansion, it is a major upgrade in lifestyle. You didn't really have enough. This is not an upgrade in lifestyle.
Well, not
but is there something special about this?
So it's a little bit like Air Force One. You get onto it and you say, I wonder whose plane is nicer. But when you say it's Air Force One is Air Force One, right? This is the White House. I find it to be a magnificent building. When I look at that building, and I look at it even from that corner, from that angle that few people see, because you're talking about the Rose Garden, right? How many people get to see the Rose Garden? To me, it's one of the most beautiful pieces of architecture. It's a great building.
I look at every president chooses what to put around him. You chose Lincoln as a bust and Lincoln as a picture.
Right.
You chose Andrew Jackson. And is that Teddy Roosevelt underneath?
Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're taking down the statue of
Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt. So explain that one. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington over here.
People say Jackson reminded your run for the White House is similar to Jackson's. He took his case to the people because Washington didn't like him.
That's right. That's what he did.
And
he had one wild, in fact, until mine, they say that was probably the most incredible election. It was a pretty well timed. You talked about it and wrote about it beautifully. Andrew Jackson was a pretty wild guy.
But now, we're in the middle, while we have this conversation, we're in a war on history. They want to take Jackson's statue out of New Orleans. Without Battle of New Orleans, we're not the same country.
I don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. I don't like anything that's going on. Now, federal, I've stopped. I've stopped federal. But a lot of states are weak. A lot of people are weak, and they're allowing it to happen. Hey, it's going over a little bit around the world now. They want to remove the statue of Gandhi, okay? All he wanted was peace. They want to take down Ulysses S. Grant. Well, he's the one that stopped the Confederates, right? So, he was a great general. Nobody's stock went higher than his stock over the last 10 or 15 years.
But do you understand how you look at Thomas Jefferson, you look at George Washington, you look at James Monroe, look at James Madison. One thing they were brilliant. They also had slaves. So how do we grow as a country, but yet not forget our past?
So you have to understand history, and you have to understand the culture and so many other aspects of our country. And people can study that, and they can hate it, and let's all hate it. But you can't take down George Washington's statue, and half of our country is named after Washington. You can't. We have to remember the heritage, the culture of our country. And, this is less important, but it's very important. Some of the things that they're trying to destroy are magnificent pieces of art. Have you ever seen an area where a statue is removed and you look at the area and they put blacktop over the top of it? They put asphalt over the top, and that's the end? And it was the center of a town or a village, and now the statue's gone, and the whole village is like a different place. And here's the other problem I have. A lot of these people that want it down don't even know what they're taking down. I watch them on television, and I see what's happening, and they're ripping down things. They have no idea what they're ripping down. But they started off with the Confederate, and then they go to Ulysses S. Grant. Well, what's that all about? And they would knock down Lincoln. There's a group that wants to take down Lincoln. They haven't figured out exactly why yet. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. I've stopped them twice now from going over to the Jefferson Memorial. If I weren't president, they would have knocked down. If a guy like Biden was president, they will knock down the Jefferson Memorial. Not going to happen.
Francis Scott Key, the latest writer of the national anthem.
He wrote the national anthem.
So, since you have done a lot for the African American community, what is your message to them who said my ancestors were enslaved because of their?
My message is that we have a great country. We have the greatest country on earth. We have a heritage, we have a history, and we should learn from the history. And if you don't understand your history, you will go back to it again. You will go right back to it. You have to learn. Think of it. You take away that whole era, and you're going to go back to it sometime. People won't know about it. They're going to forget about it. It's okay. Now, what I do like, I like the idea of building new statues to people, to great people, people that have done something. And I think that's okay. Right. But you don't want to take away our heritage and our history. And the beauty, in many cases, the beauty, the artistic beauty, some of the sculptures and some of this work is some of the great. You can go to France, you can go anywhere in the world, and you'll never see more magnificent work. And that's a factor. It's not the biggest factor, but it's a factor.
John Bolton came out and said that doesn't work with country to country. What's your reaction to that?
Look, this is a guy with no personality. All he wanted to do is drop bombs on everybody. He was one of the many people that got us into the war in the Middle East, which was a big mistake. I said to him, let me ask you, do you think, recently, I said, what did you think? He said, I think we made the right decision. I said, you lost me there. It was the worst decision in the history of our country. I know you may disagree with that. Worst, well, now you might agree. At the time, you would have, felt differently. But also, the Libyan model, you know what that means, right? Look it up. One of the dumbest things ever said, I think it was said on Deface the Nation, the Libyan model. He said the Libyan model, that was set us back, you have no idea. John Bolton was a stupid guy, and he was a guy with no heart. And he also had a statement that he would lie whenever he had to. He has that statement. It's a well-known statement. And I fired him, and I didn't think it was a big deal. And I wasn't around him very much. But what he did do is he took classified information and he published it during a presidency. It's not, it's one thing to write a book after, during. And I believe that he's a criminal. And I believe, frankly, he should go to jail for that. And that probably, possibly will happen. That's what should happen. You remember the young boy with the sailor in the submarine?
Sure. Took a picture in his submarine.
He took a picture, sent it to his mother, and I think a friend of a 30-year-old submarine.
And the backdrop had Cincy. Yeah.
They destroyed his life. And you know what I did? I pardoned him. Because Hillary Clinton should have gone to jail. And she deleted 33,000 emails. Mm-hmm. John Bolton, what he did is incredible. He took classified. That classified is higher than confidential. You have confidential, you have classified. It's the highest form of information. And by the way, it's so important, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, but in his case it was knowingly. He classified some of it. John Bolton should go to jail.
Your office. Give us an idea of what it's like being here, knowing there's pictures of Kennedy, John JFK Jr.
So this is the Resolute desk, which is very famous.
Right.
And I could show you the picture of John with the panel right here. It's a panel. It didn't used to have the panel, but when FDR sat behind that desk, he wanted a panel. This is an original photo, right? You can see it. And that's right there. And that opens up, and that's John Kennedy. That's John.
See,
who was a friend of mine. And who was getting ready. He was going to sell George magazine. He was a good friend. He was a great guy. And he was going to run for political office. He would have been very tough to beat. He had a lot of things going, including the look. We're not supposed to be talking about look anymore under the Me Too generation, but he had the look.
And do you remember the first time you were in the White House?
So I was here a long time ago. It was more or less of a fundraiser for Ronald Reagan. I was very young. I've been doing this a long time, but I was very young. And to think here we are in the Oval Office, which I would say is the most powerful, most important office anywhere in the world. I have friends coming in, I have people coming in, I have the biggest business people and heads of countries, and they sit back and they say, this is the Oval Office. It's pretty amazing.
And you were amazed by their reaction?
I've had hardened business people come into this office and start to cry. I don't think they've cried even when they were babies. I've had people come into this office, study it, look around. Could I look just for a second? And they start to cry. I have never seen anything like it.
And lastly, do you ever think?
By the way, was he tested? Because he's about 2 feet away. I can't get away from him.
I was tested an hour ago.
Because they're going to, you know what they're going to do? They're going to blame me. They're going to say, he didn't stay 6 feet away, and it's his fault.
But no, I got tested 10 minutes ago.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Lastly, you're part of history. Have you thought about that, or did you feel
I think about it all the time. I just want to do the best job that I can. And again, nobody has done so much. I'll give you a list that one after another, page after page of what we've done.
Gotcha. Now the question is, can I come anytime?
Anytime you want. You're always invited.
I have a feeling there's some people on the roof that won't like that. Mr. President, can't thank you enough for the time.
Thank you very much. Great.
A lot more to do?
I have a lot to do. Get out of here, Brian. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.